Let me tell you about the night a daughter humiliated her own mother in front of hundreds of people, and didn't even know it. Picture this. Champagne glasses catching the light, crystal chandeliers sparkling overhead, 300 wealthy guests dressed in their finest. This was the Thornton estate on a September evening, and everything was absolutely perfect. At the center of it all stood Victoria Thornton, 25 years old, beautiful, confident, celebrating her birthday like royalty. She wore a cream-colored gown that cost more than most people make in a year. Her dark hair had been straightened to perfection, falling in elegant waves down her back. She was a Yale graduate, featured in Forbes magazine, the daughter of billionaire Robert Thornton. She had everything, or so she thought. But here's the thing about Victoria. Deep down, in places she never let herself explore, there were questions. Questions she'd learned to bury. Why did her skin tan so much darker than her father's pale complexion? Why did her hair fight against every straightening treatment, curling back at her temples no matter what she did? Why did she sometimes catch her reflection and feel like she was looking at a stranger? She never asked these questions out loud. In her world, you didn't question things. You just accepted the story you'd been given. And the story she'd been given was this. Her mother, Caroline Thornton, had died of cancer when Victoria was just 2 years old. A tragic loss. A beautiful white woman, elegant and refined, gone too soon. Victoria kept no photos of her because her father said the memories were too painful. She believed him. She believed everything he told her. Now, somewhere in the back of that grand mansion, entering through the service entrance where the help always came in, was a woman named Diana. 55 years old, wearing a pressed black uniform, her dark skin showing the lines of a life lived in quiet struggle. She'd been hired just 3 days earlier as temporary catering staff. But Diana wasn't there for the money. She was there because she'd waited 25 years for this night. 25 years of watching her daughter from a distance, seeing her face on magazine covers, reading about her accomplishments, knowing every detail of her life the way only a mother could. She knew Victoria preferred white roses. She knew she laughed with her head tilted slightly to the left. She knew things no stranger should know. Around Diana's neck, hidden beneath her uniform collar, was a silver necklace with a single letter engraved on it, B for Bella. For the name she'd whispered to her newborn daughter before they took her away. 4 minutes and 23 seconds. That's how long Diana had been allowed to hold her baby. She'd counted every single second because somehow she knew she might never hold her again. And she'd been right. When the temporary staff lined up for the brief introduction, Robert Thornton's eyes swept across their faces with the bored disinterest of a man who rarely noticed those who served him. Then his gaze landed on Diana, and for just a fraction of a second, everything changed. Recognition flashed across his face, followed immediately by fear. His knuckles went white around his champagne glass. But he said nothing. He simply turned away faster than necessary and went back to talking to a senator's wife like nothing had happened. But Diana had seen it. He remembered her. Of course he did. Across the room, someone else was watching. Dr. Catherine Wells, 65 years old, a retired obstetrician who delivered hundreds of babies in her career. Most of them had blurred together over the years, but certain nights stayed with you. Certain faces you could never forget. When she saw Diana, something tugged at her memory. That necklace. That silver chain disappearing beneath the collar. Where had she seen it before? The evening continued. Diana moved through the crowd with her tray, collecting empty glasses, invisible in the way service workers often become. But her eyes never left Victoria. Her daughter. Moving, laughing, tossing that straightened hair over her shoulder, completely unaware that the woman watching her had given birth to her 25 years ago in a hospital room while wearing that same silver necklace. Then it happened. Victoria was posing for photographs with her friends, laughing, adjusting her position for the perfect shot. She stepped backward without looking, and her heel caught the edge of Diana's tray. Glasses rattled. Victoria spun around, and her expression shifted from surprise to irritation in an instant. "Watch where you're standing," she snapped. "Can't you see we're taking photos?" Diana lowered her head immediately, the way she'd learned to do years ago. "I'm sorry, miss. I'll move." But her hands were trembling. Because this was the first time in 25 years she'd heard her daughter's voice from inches away instead of through a screen, and it cut through her chest like a knife. One of Victoria's friends, a blonde woman in a red dress, laughed. Honestly, the help these days. No training whatsoever. Victoria looked Diana up and down, taking in the worn uniform, the rough hands, the bowed head. And something about the older woman's posture irritated her. It seemed too humble, too present, as if she actually wanted to be noticed. "People like you should know how to keep your distance," Victoria said, loud enough for everyone around them to hear. "This isn't your world. Try to remember that." Each word hit Diana like a physical blow. But she'd prepared for this. She'd known her daughter might not be kind. She'd hoped otherwise, but she'd prepared. As Diana stepped back, something happened that nearly broke her. She caught the scent of Victoria's perfume. Jasmine and sandalwood. 25 years ago, when Diana had worked in this very mansion as a young housekeeper, she'd saved her first real paycheck to buy a bottle of perfume. She'd planned to give it to her daughter someday. That bottle still sat unopened in her apartment, waiting. And now her daughter wore the same scent, and Diana had to grip her tray to keep from collapsing. The photography session continued. Diana retreated to the edge of the room, breathing slowly, telling herself she could leave now. She'd seen her daughter. She'd been close enough to hear her voice. That could be enough. But then Victoria raised her champagne glass high, gathering her friends close. "To my mother," Victoria announced, her voice carrying across the crowd. "Caroline Thornton. I wish she could be here to see this. She would have been so proud." Her friends raised their glasses. "To Caroline." And something inside Diana shattered. 25 years of grief rose up in her chest. She tried to hold it in. She'd promised herself she would only watch, only observe. But a sob escaped her throat before she could stop it. Victoria turned at the sound. Their eyes met. Diana's face was wet with tears she hadn't realized she was crying. For just a moment, Victoria simply stared. Then her expression hardened into something worse than anger. Pure contempt. "Why are you crying?" Victoria demanded, stepping closer. "I was talking about my mother. This has nothing to do with you." Diana opened her mouth to apologize, to make an excuse, to retreat. But the words wouldn't come. She could only look at her daughter's face, so close now, close enough to touch, and see the ghost of the baby she'd held for 4 minutes and 23 seconds. Victoria's friends gathered behind her, watching the confrontation with amused interest. Other guests began to turn, sensing drama. "Well," Victoria pressed. "What's your problem? Why are you staring at me like that?" Diana should have walked away. She should have apologized and disappeared, and let her daughter live the life that had been constructed for her. But something in Victoria's voice, the casual cruelty, the absolute certainty that Diana was nothing, nobody, less than human, it broke something inside her. "You have her eyes," Diana whispered, her voice barely audible. Victoria frowned. "What?" "Your grandmother," Diana said. "You have her eyes. She died before you were born, but I always hoped you would have her eyes." The words made no sense to Victoria. This stranger knew nothing about her family, nothing about her grandmother, nothing about her. And yet something in the woman's gaze, something deep and sad and familiar, made her stomach tighten with an emotion she couldn't name. She pushed the feeling down. She'd been pushing such feelings down her entire life. "You're insane," Victoria said coldly. "Get away from me before I have security remove you." But as Diana turned to walk away, her hand rose unconsciously to touch the silver chain around her neck. The pendant with the letter B, hidden beneath her uniform. B for Bella. The name she'd given her daughter before they changed it to Victoria. 30 minutes passed. Victoria tried to return to her party, laughing with friends, posing for more photographs. But she couldn't shake that encounter from her mind. That strange woman with tears on her face, speaking about her grandmother as if she'd known her. It was nonsense. The woman was clearly unstable. But when Victoria spotted Diana again near the champagne station, collecting glasses with trembling hands, something snapped inside her. This woman's presence felt like an intrusion, a stain on her perfect evening. Victoria crossed the room with purpose, her friends trailing behind like an entourage. "You're still here," Victoria said, stopping directly in front of Diana. "I thought I made myself clear." Diana kept her eyes down. "I'm just doing my job, miss." "Your job is to be invisible," Victoria replied. "And you're failing at it." She reached out and took the tray from Diana's hands, examining it as if searching for flaws. Then, with a motion that appeared almost accidental, she tipped her glass of red wine forward. The liquid splashed across Diana's white shirt, spreading like a wound across her chest. Gasps rippled through the nearby guests. A few laughed nervously. Most simply watched with the careful blankness of people who'd learned never to interfere with the powerful. "Look at this mess," Victoria announced, her voice ringing across the room. You can't even hold a tray properly." Diana stood motionless, wine dripping down her uniform. She did not wipe it away. She did not move. "People like you," Victoria continued, each word sharp and precise, "were born without the right to dream. You think you can walk into a place like this and belong? Look at yourself. This is why you'll spend your whole life serving people like me." The crowd grew larger. Phones appeared, recording the confrontation. No one stepped forward to help. A security guard approached. "Should I remove her, Miss Thornton?" Victoria waved her hand dismissively. "Get her out of my sight. She's ruining my birthday." As the guard gripped Diana's arm and began pulling her toward the exit, Diana did something she'd promised herself she wouldn't do. She stopped walking. She planted her feet. And she turned back toward her daughter. 25 years of silence pressed against her throat, demanding release. "You have a birthmark," Diana said, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. "Shaped like a teardrop, behind your right ear." Victoria froze. The crowd fell silent. "When you were born," Diana continued, tears streaming down her face, "I named you Isabella. It means beautiful. I held you for 4 minutes and 23 seconds before they took you away from me. I counted every second because I knew I might never hold you again." The silence was unbearable. Then someone in the crowd laughed. A sharp bark of disbelief. "Is this a joke?" a man called out. "Is this some kind of performance?" Others joined in, their laughter spreading like wildfire. The tension broke into mockery. Victoria's face flushed red. She stepped forward, her voice loud and defensive. "Do you people see this?" she shouted, gesturing at herself. "Look at me. I'm white. My family has been white for generations. My mother was Caroline Thornton, who died when I was 2 years old." She pointed at Diana, her finger trembling. "And you expect anyone to believe that this woman, this poor, desperate black woman, is my mother? What kind of scam is this?" But Diana didn't flinch. She simply looked at her daughter with infinite sadness. "Have you never wondered," Diana said softly, "why your skin is darker than your father's? Why your hair curls no matter how many times you straighten it? Why you feel different from everyone in your family, even though you can't explain why?" The laughter faded. People exchanged uncomfortable glances. Because those were the exact questions Victoria had buried for her entire life. Her hands clenched into fists. "Stop talking. Stop talking right now." "I'm not here for money," Diana continued. "I just wanted to see you one more time. Close enough to remember what it felt like to hold you." "Liar!" Victoria screamed, her composure finally shattering. "You're a liar and a fraud." She spun toward her father, who stood near the back of the room, frozen. "Dad," Victoria called out, her voice cracking. Tell them she's lying." Every eye in the room turned to Robert Thornton. He walked slowly through the parting crowd and stopped a few feet from Diana. For the first time in 25 years, they looked at each other. Robert opened his mouth to speak. The crowd leaned in, waiting for his denial. But the words that came out were not the words anyone expected. "Victoria," he said quietly, "we should discuss this privately." The room erupted in whispers. Victoria stared at her father as if he'd just spoken in a foreign language. "What?" she breathed. "Dad, just tell them she's crazy." His jaw tightened. "This isn't the place for this conversation. It's a yes or no question." Victoria's voice rose to a shriek. "Is she my mother or not?" Robert Thornton looked away from his daughter's eyes. And in that moment, Victoria's entire world began to crumble. Sometimes the worst lies aren't the ones people tell you. They're the ones you tell yourself. Victoria stood in that ballroom, surrounded by 300 witnesses, and watched her father refuse to answer the simplest question in the world. "Is she my mother or not?" 4 words. 1 answer. But Robert Thornton couldn't say it. Wouldn't say it. And his silence was louder than any confession could ever be. "The party is over," Robert announced to the room, his voice carrying that authority he'd used to build an empire. "Everyone, please leave. Now." The guests began moving toward the exits, but slowly, reluctantly. Their phones were still out, still recording, still capturing every moment of the Thornton family's perfect life falling apart in real time. Victoria grabbed her father's arm. "Why won't you answer me? Why won't you just say she's lying?" Robert pulled his arm free. "Because I don't discuss family matters in public." But it was too late. His non-answer had already answered everything. Diana stood there, wine still dripping from her uniform, handcuffs waiting to be placed on her wrists. But her eyes were only on Victoria. Her daughter. The baby she'd named Isabella before they'd renamed her Victoria and built an entire fiction to explain where she came from. Your mother, Diana said gently. The woman you call Caroline, she never existed, Bella. She was a story they created. A convenient fiction to protect the family name. Don't call me that, Victoria whispered. My name is Victoria. Your name is whatever they decided to call you, Diana replied. But I named you first. Before anyone else. Before they took you away and pretended I never existed. The police arrived then, pushing through the crowd. A security guard pointed at Diana, explaining she'd been harassing the family, making false claims, disrupting everything. One officer approached Diana with handcuffs ready. Ma'am, you need to come with us. Diana didn't resist. She extended her wrists calmly, letting the cold metal close around them. As they led her toward the door, she turned back one last time. I don't need you to believe me tonight, Diana said, looking straight at Victoria. I just needed you to hear the truth. What you do with it is your choice. And then they took her away. Victoria stood frozen, her body rigid with shock. She was Victoria Thornton, daughter of Robert and Caroline Thornton. White, wealthy, privileged. These were facts. Immutable truths. The foundation of everything she was. But her hand rose unconsciously to her ear, fingers brushing the smooth skin behind it. The birthmark she'd never thought about. The small teardrop shape she'd been born with. A birthmark that stranger had described perfectly without ever having seen it. Don't, Robert said sharply, watching her movement. Don't let her get into your head. She's disturbed. She saw an opportunity and took it. Victoria's hand dropped. Then why didn't you say that? Why didn't you just tell everyone she was lying? Robert's expression flickered. Because engaging with delusion only gives it power. The best response is silence. Silence, Victoria repeated. Is that what you've been doing for 25 years? Staying silent. Her father's face hardened. You have everything. A name, a fortune, a future. Isn't that enough? Does it matter where you came from? The question hung in the air between them, unanswered and unanswerable. Does it matter where you came from? Victoria wanted to say no. She wanted to believe that bloodlines didn't matter, that identity was whatever you made it, that the past could stay buried forever if you just refused to dig it up. But she couldn't, because somewhere deep inside, she'd always known something was wrong. She'd always felt it. Meanwhile, across town, Diana sat in the back of a police car watching the Thornton mansion grow smaller through the window. She thought about that hospital room 25 years ago. Robert standing over her bed with lawyers and documents. The choice that was never really a choice. Sign away your rights or lose everything, including any chance of ever seeing your daughter again. She'd been young then. Poor. Alone. A black woman who'd made the mistake of falling in love with a white billionaire who'd promised her the world and then decided she was an inconvenience to be erased. Diana had signed the papers. She'd taken the money that was supposed to buy her silence forever. And she'd spent every day since then regretting it. At the police station, they put her in an interrogation room. A detective asked questions for an hour. What was her connection to the Thornton family? What were her motives? What proof did she have? Diana told him everything. The relationship with Robert 25 years ago when she'd worked as a housekeeper in his mansion. The pregnancy. The birth. The documents she'd been forced to sign. The money that was supposed to make her disappear forever. She had no physical proof. The documents she'd signed had stripped her of any evidence. But she told the truth anyway, because after 25 years of silence, the truth was all she had left. The detective listened with skeptical eyes. When Diana finished, he left the room and made a phone call. 30 minutes later, he came back with unexpected news. You're free to go, he said. The Thornton family has declined to press charges. They're calling it a misunderstanding. Diana understood immediately. Pressing charges meant a trial. A trial meant discovery. Discovery meant the truth coming out in ways Robert Thornton couldn't control. It was easier to let her go. Back at the Thornton mansion, something else was happening. Dr. Catherine Wells had stayed behind after most of the guests had left. She found Robert standing alone in the empty ballroom, surrounded by overturned champagne glasses and the wreckage of his daughter's birthday party. Richard, she said quietly, we need to talk. Robert turned to her, his expression guarded. Dr. Wells, I thought you'd left. I remember that night, Catherine said, keeping her voice low. 25 years ago. I remember the delivery. I remember the necklace that woman was wearing tonight, the same necklace she wore in the hospital. I remember the papers you made me sign. Robert's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. I signed your confidentiality agreement, Catherine continued. I've kept my silence all this time, but I never agreed to forget what I saw. She met his eyes without flinching. Your daughter deserves to know the truth. 25 years is long enough. Robert grabbed her arm, his grip tight. You have no proof of anything. It would be your word against mine, and we both know whose word carries more weight. Catherine pulled her arm free. I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here because I've carried this guilt for 25 years, and I'm tired of it. She walked toward the door, then stopped. Whatever you decide to tell Victoria is your choice. But the truth has a way of surfacing eventually. It always does. She left without looking back. Victoria had locked herself in her childhood bedroom. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the wall covered with photographs of herself growing up. Birthday parties, graduations, family vacations. In every single picture, she stood beside Robert Thornton, the only parent she'd ever known. There were no pictures of Caroline Thornton anywhere. She'd asked about this once when she was 12. Her father had explained that it was too painful to keep photographs of his deceased wife on display. The memories were better kept in his heart. She'd believed him. She'd believed everything. A knock came at her door. Robert's voice followed. Victoria, we need to talk. She didn't answer. I know you're confused, he continued through the door. I know tonight was difficult, but everything I've done has been to protect you, to give you the best possible life. Doesn't that count for something? Finally, Victoria spoke, her voice hollow. Was she telling the truth? Silence. Dad, was that woman my mother? More silence. Then footsteps retreating down the hallway. His refusal to answer was answer enough. Victoria sat alone in the darkness, feeling everything she'd ever believed about herself crumbling. She was Victoria Thornton, daughter of a billionaire, heir to an empire. But she was also someone else. Someone whose name had been changed, whose history had been erased, whose mother had been paid to disappear. She thought about the woman at the gala. The tears on her face when Victoria mentioned Caroline. The steadiness in her voice when she spoke about holding her baby for 4 minutes and 23 seconds. The love in her eyes, even as Victoria poured wine on her chest and called her worthless. What kind of mother could look at a daughter who had just humiliated her and still show nothing but love? Victoria reached for her phone. Her fingers moved before her mind could stop them, searching for DNA testing services. Companies that promised results within 72 hours. She ordered a kit for overnight delivery, providing her credit card and shipping address with mechanical precision. Then she remembered something. A champagne glass that Diana had collected during the gala. One that Victoria had watched her pick up from the VIP table. It would still be in the kitchen, unwashed, waiting with the rest of the party debris. It would have Diana's DNA on it. Victoria walked downstairs in the dark, past her father's study where light still glowed beneath the door, past the ballroom where cleaning staff worked in silence. She found the glass exactly where she expected it, marked with a faint lipstick stain on the rim. She took it back to her room and waited for morning. 3 days passed like a lifetime. Victoria moved through them like a ghost, going through the motions of her normal life, while everything inside her screamed with uncertainty. Then the envelope arrived. Victoria intercepted the mail before anyone could see it. She brought it to her room, locked the door, and sat on her bed with the sealed results in her hands. The answer to everything was inside this envelope. The truth about who she was, where she came from, what had been done to her before she was old enough to remember. She held it for hours. Morning became afternoon, became evening. The sun moved across the sky, and still she sat there, unable to open it. Because once she opened it, everything would change. There would be no going back. No more pretending. No more comfortable lies. Across town, Diana sat on a bench at the bus station with a small bag beside her. She had no reason to stay in this city anymore. She'd come to see her daughter, and she'd seen her. She'd spoken the truth, and the truth had been rejected. There was nothing left. A bus pulled up, its destination sign glowing in the darkness. Diana picked up her bag and stood. Then her phone buzzed. She almost ignored it, but something made her check the screen. It was an alert from a social media account she'd created years ago, one that tracked any public mention of Victoria Thornton. A new post had appeared, uploaded just minutes ago from Victoria's official account. Diana opened the link with trembling fingers. The post was simple, just a photograph of an unopened envelope lying on a bed, and a caption beneath it. Some truths change everything. I'm not sure I'm ready. The comments were already flooding in. Hundreds of people asking what she meant, what was in the envelope, what was happening. Victoria hadn't responded to any of them. But Diana understood. Her daughter had the DNA results. Her daughter was holding the proof of everything Diana had claimed. And her daughter was scared. Diana looked at the bus, its doors still open, the driver waiting. She could leave now. She could disappear and let Victoria figure out the rest on her own. Or she could stay. Diana stepped away from the bus. The doors closed behind her, and the vehicle pulled away into the night. She sat back down on the bench and watched it disappear. She would wait. She'd waited 25 years already. She could wait a little longer. Back at the Thornton mansion, Victoria finally rose from her bed. She walked to the bathroom and stood before the mirror, really looking at herself for the first time in her life. The olive skin that never matched her father's pale complexion. The dark curly hair she'd spent years straightening. The features that belonged to someone else. Someone whose face she'd seen for the first time at a birthday party that felt like a lifetime ago. She lifted the unopened envelope and held it against her chest. Then she walked out of her room, down the hallway, toward her father's study. The door was closed, but light glowed underneath. He was inside, probably working late, probably pretending everything was normal. Victoria raised her hand to knock. Then stopped. She stood there for a long moment, envelope pressed to her heart, truth waiting inside. Because here's what nobody tells you about buried secrets. The most terrifying thing isn't the moment they surface. It's the moment you have to decide what to do with them. Do you open the envelope? Do you face what you've always suspected but never dared to believe? Or do you walk away? Burn it? Pretend you never saw it? Live the rest of your life in the comfortable lie you've always known? Victoria stood outside that door, an unopened envelope in her hands, standing at the edge of a truth that would change everything. And somewhere across town, Diana sat on a bench at a bus station, watching the night grow darker, holding on to a hope she'd carried for 25 years. A mother who'd never stopped loving her daughter. A daughter who'd never known she was loved. And between them, an envelope that held the truth. Would Victoria open it? Would she find the courage to face what had been hidden from her for her entire life? That answer is hers alone to decide. But one thing is certain. Some truths can't stay buried forever. They wait in the darkness, patient and persistent, until someone is finally brave enough to bring them into the light. And when that moment comes, when the envelope finally opens and the truth finally speaks, everything changes. The question is, are you ready for it? If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is face the truth we've been running from our entire lives. And sometimes love waits longer than we ever imagined possible.